In today's episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast, we're looking back at the 2013 NBA draft, redrafting all 60 picks. Michael Bolton, who's going to go at 1?
Let's get to it.
We'll find out soon. Let's get to it indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com and at Yahoo Sports Australia, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. And today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Go to builtbar.com and use the promo code Locked On for $10 off. It's the best tasting protein bar you will ever find. Today, in the show, we are looking back at the 2013 NBA draft. We've done all the other drafts, 14 through 19, as we build ourselves up towards the 2020 NBA draft, whenever the hell that's going to happen. But we are looking back all the way back to 2013, a pretty weird draft, of course, where the Rookie of the Year didn't go in the top 10, where the top of the draft looks like an absolute disaster, but we got superstars out of it and a bunch of really good undrafted players. So let's start off and have a look where these players went in a redraft. And at number 1, nobody is surprised at all because it's Giannis Antetokounmpo. Of course, he's the number 1 player. He is the reigning MVP. He's probably going to be the reigning 2-time MVP whenever this season gets cracking again. He was selected, of course, all the way down at number 15, one spot outside the lottery, and has been pretty much by far the best player in this class. The guy that comes in second, we'll talk about in a second. I guess you could make an argument considering how close their overall win shares numbers are. But Giannis is just that dominant of a player at the moment who is really... Giannis, amazingly, over his career, is averaging 20 points per game. And remember how little he played in those first couple of years. He's averaging 29 and 4.3 assists. Started to develop that three-point shot a little bit this season after Jason Kidd screwed that up in the first couple of years, but pretty obvious at number 1. It is big old Yanni. At number 2, it is... Where's my button?
Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert.
The big escargot, Rudy Gobert, comes in at number 2 in this redraft. He was the 27th pick overall by the Denver Nuggets, of course, traded to the Utah Jazz. He is just a bee's dick behind Giannis in terms of win shares, 0.7 win shares different there. Behind him in box score plus minus, but ahead, he is actually the leader in win shares per 48 over this class. Gobert has played under 30 minutes in his career, but averaged 12 and 11, of course, blocked a ton of shots, really good field goal percentage, a significantly underrated offensive player. Just because he can't shoot doesn't mean he's not a good offensive player, and a multi-time defensive player of the year. So that's why you look at it, of course Giannis is number 1, but Gobert's not that far behind as a number 2. Again, a multi-time defensive player of the year. That's an awesome option, especially when you're drafting him at the end of the 20s. And a really, really good offensive player, one of the best role men in the NBA, play finisher, extremely efficient. Free throw percentage has been a problem for him, as it has been for Yanni throughout his career. But these two, I think, were pretty obvious to have as the top 2 picks. Then stuff starts to get a little bit wild. I went at number 3 with Victor Oladipo. I don't think that should be overly controversial. He was the number 2 pick in this draft. He had that absolutely balls to the wall 17-18 All-NBA season where his scoring, his efficiency, his defensive stuff just went all through the roof. And then it fell back off a little bit the next season. Then, of course, he suffered the catastrophic quad injury. And when he came back, he didn't quite look that good. We don't know what that's going to mean for the rest of his career. He had moments in Orlando and in Oklahoma City that would make you say, well, he looks to be a solid enough player. It's just that one Indiana season that really stood out. Out of this whole entire group, he's 3rd overall in points per game over his career. He averages almost 4 assists as well. But his other advanced stuff isn't as good. 11th overall in win shares. Oladipo is 6th in box score plus minus. He's 4th in VORP. So, like, the VORP is a strong number. So they're okay. And I could entertain arguments that maybe CJ McCollum, who I've got going at number 4, would go ahead of Oladipo. I personally would never make that selection, but I can understand that argument. And Vic comes in at number 3. as I've already spoiled for you, at number 4 is Christian James McCullum, who was the number 10 pick back in 2013, missed his whole rookie season, basically had injuries his first 2 years. It was really the end of his second season and start of his third where he started to come along. A guy that scores at a really, really strong rate, has some really good shooting numbers, averaged 18 points a game over his career, but does struggle in other areas. Still, he's 5th in this group in win shares and 7th in box score plus minus. I don't think there's any doubt that you'd have him in this top 5 grouping at least. I think he gets a little bit overrated by some because of his high scoring, and we always, I say we in a collective because I think I'm not one of those, maybe I am at some point, but we overrate points per game, and you really devalue what is he doing defensively or creating for others. And he does have some of that ability, but that's not what his game is. His main point is scoring, and that's still really, really valuable. And he's a very good player. I don't buy the fact that if he was on a team without Dame, that his team would be crushing it. He'd be a multi-time All-Star, All-NBA player. I'm not sure he's that good, but again, at number 4, I feel pretty confident having him at that area. At number 5, we are straight into the undrafted players, because there are quite a few good undrafted players in this draft. And at number 5, it's Bob Cov, Robert Covington, who was, of course, undrafted, played initially with the Houston Rockets, and then was waived, and then became I'm going to say a star. Maybe a star in some people's eyes with the Sixers, dropped off a bit with Minnesota and has been really good with Houston. And by a star, I remember 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, having arguments with people when I said, Robert Covington's a more valuable player in the NBA than Carmelo Anthony. In fact, I've had plenty of these discussions with Carmelo Anthony with people on Twitter before. When I said Porzingis was a better player, I said Paul George was a better player. This is all over the course of his career. Maybe I'm just significantly down on Melo. But when we look at Covington, he is a very useful player. Now, it's the opposite of what McCullum does. He doesn't go out there and score big amounts of points, but he hits threes. He doesn't necessarily shoot them at the elite 45 Seth Curry percentages, but he hits them at a good enough rate. He takes a ton of them. He is a very good player in terms of defense, on-ball defense, playing passing lanes defense, providing strong rebounding and shot blocking as a functional center in Houston's defense at the moment. Look, and obviously a significantly underrated fantasy player consistently. So I think having him at number 5, and considering how strong his career has been despite being undrafted, I think that's fair. Now, if you don't think it's fair, please let me know down below in the comments of where you would have had Covington and who you would have had here at number 5 instead. At number 6, Otto Porter. Porter was the 3rd drafted player in this group, and like a few of these guys, like McCullum, he missed the first couple of years of his career, stuck with the hip injuries and behind Trevor Ariza, and then started to come into his own after that with Washington. Of course, he's been in Chicago the last season, barely played due to injuries, but still, in this group, he is 4th overall in box score plus minus. It's not a bad result. He's 5th in VORP, despite playing or having those injury problems. 10th in win shares per 48, 6th in win shares. He's averaged only 11 points over his career, but a player who's a better than 40% three-point shooter is insanely valuable. I think probably his best position is up at the 4, playing some 3, but playing some 4. That's not happening for him at Chicago. We've seen flashes of him show a little bit more of being able to create for others with the ball at times, so that's not a consistent thing. And one thing that has stood out for him is low usage. Now, that's some of his own fault, it's some of his coach's fault. I think he can deal with a higher usage, but we also saw last year when Wall went down and he was forced into that role, he did struggle quite a bit with efficiency. So maybe he is better suited to a 15-14% usage role, bang in the shots, play strong enough defense. Not a bit of an overrated defender, but play strong enough defense and be really efficient. And that's, having those sort of players is useful. I did debate this quite a bit, whether he should go at 6 or the bloke I've got at 7 should go there. And that bloke at 7 is Steve Adams, who has been a rock for Oklahoma. Gets out of the way for Russell Westbrook to get his rebounds, provides solid defense, but never a strong rim protector. He upped his rebound rates this season. He's always threatened that he's going to start shooting threes, and he never has. But overall, win shares, he's 3rd in this group. That's pretty impressive. In box score plus minus, he is 11th, so not quite as good. In VORP, he is 7th, and that's sort of about where I've got him placed here in this group. He's averaged 27 minutes, 10 points, and 7.5 rebounds over his career. Just the 27 minutes, as I said. A solid, serviceable NBA starting center. Never an all-star, never going to be an all-star, I don't think. Probably got another 2-3 years left at this sort of a level, but really strong. And at number 7, again, I don't really see how you could argue too much with that. He was picked number 12 overall in this draft. Let's go with another undrafted guy at number 8, and that is Vanilla Tice, Daniel Tice. Yes, we haven't seen much of Tice because he didn't come over to the NBA until the last couple of seasons. But if I know what I know now about Tice and doing this draft and looking at the guys underneath him, he's really bloody good. He is a very, very good starting center. We've seen that for Boston this season. Yeah, he's averaging 9 points and 7 rebounds. Whoop-de-doo. 1.3 blocks. Ugh, cool. He's shooting, what? Actually, this is his third NBA season. He's shooting 34% from 3 on 1 attempts. Like, it's not that strong. But he's just really good. Defensively, he's been awesome for this Celtics team. Now, how much of that is because it's the Celtics? I'm not sure. But he has been exactly what they've needed. Win shares per 48 over 0.2, which is a massive number this year. Career number of 0.19, massive. All his advanced stuff is really, really strong. And again, we've only seen 3 seasons of Tice versus 7 of these other guys. But who's to say if he came over when he was 21, 22, which was his draft year, that he wouldn't have been able to do this for 5-6 years. The information I have at the moment would lead me to say that he's better than the guys that are coming underneath him, even though he's got that smaller NBA resume at this point. One of the blokes that's coming underneath him
Giggity
is Nerlens Noel. Now, the hype on Noel coming into the draft was huge, drafted by the Pelicans and then traded to the Sixers for Drew Holiday. Sat out his whole rookie season with that ACL injury. Like someone like Covington, the stats, you go, shit, look at these block numbers, look at these steal numbers, they're amazing. He's a real chance to be a 2 steals, 2 blocks per game guy if he plays 30 minutes a night, but will he ever play 30 minutes a night? That's the problem. Probably not. I think he's settled into his role now, backup center for the Oklahoma City Thunder. He comes in, he plays 22 minutes, he is awesome in that role, but you can't extend him too much further. He's not strong, he's not that good of an offensive player, but he can be really good defensively. He can be really good playing passing lanes, super quick hands for a big man, great rim protector. Injuries have been a concern. There's been some issues with him in his career with off-court stuff, but when I look at this, could I make an argument for him over Tice? Very easily. Over Adams? Probably not. And if he didn't have the injury, which he did have at the time of the draft, we knew that. If he didn't have that injury, then I think his career could have gone a little bit differently. He was never going to be better than Joel Embiid in Philadelphia. And the Sixers screwed up their return for him in terms of when they traded him. But yeah, I think he's absolutely a serviceable NBA rotation player, which is absolutely fine. At number 10, Kelly Olynyk. He was picked number 13th by the Dallas Mavericks, traded to Boston on draft night, then ended up in Miami. And he's just good. I don't know what more to say about Olynyk. He's good. He's a 38% career 3-point shooter. He averages just 21 minutes a night. When he pushes into bigger minutes, he nearly always plays well, but consistently he can't get that from whatever it is. And you have to think that's maybe a problem with him because it was the same with Stevens. It was the same with Spoelstra. Up and down and up and down. But almost invariably in my watching of him, he plays well when he's out there. And that's really useful. I could argue myself to have Olynyk over Noel and even over Tice. But I haven't seen him do it at a consistent level at a 27-minute-a-night rate for a season, a season and a half, 2 seasons. He's up and down. You go, shit, this looks great. And then it disappears. Number 11, another undrafted player. Let's hit the music. The Undertaker, Dwayne Dedmon, redrafted here at number 11. One of those players where he had moments for the Orlando Magic as a backup center. And you went, look, this guy looks all right in that sort of a role. He's playing pretty well, and then goes to Atlanta and all of a sudden becomes this deadly long-range 3-point bomber. He went from attempting literally 0 3-pointers a game with the Magic and then with the Spurs for that one season, where when he played for the Spurs, actually, he was really good, and I chided Popovich quite a bit. Not that he listened or gave a shit what I said, but I said he should be playing. He needs to play Dedmon more. And then he went to Atlanta and started banging in threes, attempting over 2 a game, and got up to a peak of 1.3 threes made per game at 38%, a good rim protector, a solid defender, a solid enough offensive player who was really shitful in Sacramento, but then went back to Atlanta and played pretty well. I thought he's been pretty good throughout his career. He's still got an overall a negative box score plus minus, Dedmon, and that's mainly influenced by just how dreadful he was this season and how bad he was in the first year or so of his career. He originally started out with the Golden State Warriors before he went to Philadelphia and then off to Orlando. I believe he might have gone to Orlando in the Dwight Howard trade. But yeah, that's sort of where Dedmon sits at number 11. Number 12 in this redraft, Mason Plumlee. This is how you know the draft is getting a little bit rough. 22nd pick in the draft. When he started for Brooklyn, I thought he played pretty well. When he moved over to Portland and he started there, I thought he played pretty well. And then he's moved into being a backup in Denver and again plays pretty well. Mike Malone relies on him a little bit too much, tries to play him alongside Big Chungus a little bit too much for my liking. But he's absolutely perfectly fine as a backup center, as is Kelly Olynyk, as is Nerlens Noel. He is absolutely the league leader in reverse dunks and reverse alley-oops. I don't know why every time he goes one, it has to be reverse. He showed massive improvements in his passing skills in Portland. They seem to have dropped off a little bit in Denver. Never going to be a good shooter, but solid enough. Absolutely solid as an NBA rotation player. Let's go for our third undrafted player here at number 13, Seth Curry, an elite three-point shooter who has shown some ability to be a creator and also some ability to be a not horrible defender. And when you look at his body, 6'2", pretty small, that you think, oh, he's going to get toasted. And he's not that bad. He is a career 44% three-point shooter. This season, he is attempting 5 threes a game and hitting 45%. This, if the season ends where it is, this will be, let's phrase it this way. In his career, he played, weirdly at the start, 2 games in his first year, 2 games in his next year. But once he became a rotation guy with the Kings in 15-16, so it's 4 seasons, he's had 1 year of shooting under 45% from 3. And that bad season was when he shot 43%. And then he had that leg issue that caused him to miss all of the 17-18 season. He is just an absolutely elite shooter who's got some defensive ability, not much else, but that level of elite shooter, that is absolutely unbelievably elite. It puts you into the lottery. At number 14 is Timmy Hardaway, who had some moments in New York, went to Atlanta, improved, went back to New York, regressed, was there a common theme there? Went to Dallas, and amazingly was really, really good this season. He's hard to get a handle on. If you put too much on his plate, he just falls apart. In New York, hey, we're going to make you the number 1 scorer, or you're going to handle the ball, and he just farted in our faces. He goes to New York, and they go, just stand there, let Doncic and let Porzingis do whatever they do, and bang in threes, and he goes, sweet. And it worked, and he was really, really good. And he improved his defense, and he can handle the ball a bit. That is the role for him. He's not a number 1 guy, or a 2, or even a 3, really. But at this spot, fantastic. Love it. At number 15, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, the 8th pick in this draft. High hopes for him coming out of Georgia, going to Detroit. Never really lived up to them. I think he gets unfairly shit on by Lakers fans. And he has had bad moments, but he's a solid enough three-point shooter who can play passable defense on 1s and 2s, maybe 3s. Rotation wings who can hit 3s? Absolutely. Why not? They're good options. Number 16 is Dennis Schroeder, who was the backup in Atlanta. I thought was good as a backup. Was a starter in Atlanta. I thought was bad as a starter. Went to OKC and struggled over there. But this season, he's been really good. Now, how much of that is the time that he spends playing with Chris Paul and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 2 blokes who handle the ball and cover up his defensive ineptitude? I'm not sure. He's probably going to win 6th Man of the Year. Is this his role as a bench guard playing 27, 30 minutes a night? Maybe. Coming in off the bench while Terrence Ferguson and Lou Dort start and then him closing games out. His numbers without Paul aren't anywhere near as good, and that is a massive concern as to if he gets overpaid or what happens when Paul retires or is traded off. There is a real concern there. But again, a capable backup point guard is a useful player. At number 17 is Cody Zeller. The record of the Hornets without him versus with him has been stark. He's really important to what they do, but you can't look at him and go, well, what does he do well? And the answer to that is stuff. I'm not sure what it is. But again, multiple coaches haven't really given him that full range to go ahead and do the stuff that makes him good. So is it multiple coaches that are wrong? Very possibly. Or is it just there's something that he's not quite good at or not executing or not doing that needs to be done. And that's the concern I have with a lot of these guys. 17, Cody Zeller. 18, Alex Len, who was dreadful in Phoenix, came along well at the end of his stint in Phoenix. I thought he started to play pretty well. Moved to Atlanta, played pretty well there. Sacramento, we've seen that he's okay. Again, he's a backup center, like ideally what Zeller is, like what Plumlee is, what ideally Olynyk and Dedmon and Noel and all those guys are. That's why we talk about when we value centers, and when I go to look at guys in the draft, say like a James Wiseman, who we're probably going to do for next week's draft scouting profile, is that unless you're an elite center, there are just so many of these guys who, I can start them at a pinch and they're solid enough backups that the replacement level is so high. There are just so many of these guys around that if you have a Len or a Zeller or Plumlee or Dedmon or a Lind, look how many of these guys are around that you can just slot in and go, well, they'll give me my 20, 22 minutes, and I get another guy who gives me their 20, 22 minutes, and I'm okay at center, unless I've got an elite player. So wasting that high pick on someone, spoiling some of my thoughts on Wiseman, which I haven't dug into the film excessively on him, which I will do. That's why I'm a little bit down on those centers who aren't absolute uber elite, one-of-a-kind type prospects. At number 19, speaking of backup centers, Gorgui Dieng, who had a moment, a stretch in Minnesota as a strong starting center. Karl-Anthony Towns arrived and he went back to the bench. He has started to develop a three-point shot. I think he's a pretty solid enough defensive player. You would never want to rely upon him as a starting center long-term, but he can fill it in the short term like all these other guys. Absolutely can just be a useful player. Obviously overpaid at the moment, but useful. This is where things get ugly. I really, really desperately wanted to have a 3-player run of Snelly, Dally, and Melly, but I had to break it up to make it more accurate. At number 20 is Tone Snell, the king of the 27-minute 0.0 rebound, 0 assist, 0 steal, 0 block game. He has moments where coaches must think he's good. I don't, so maybe there's something that I'm missing there. He can provide some okay defense. He can get hot and hit threes in bunches. He can go as stone cold as anybody and not even touch the ball, but he's a useful rotation wing player. 21 is your rookie of the year, Mickey Carter-Williams, who, again, played well in Philadelphia, got found out quickly, was a disaster in Chicago, in Houston, and now in Orlando, is actually really good as a backup point guard / shooting guard / small forward. He can't shoot. He never will be able to. But he can defend his ass off. He can block shots. He can get steals. He can set up guys. He can assist. He can do a ton of things. And that makes him useful enough to be a rotation player. Same with Matty Dellavedova, who at this point, he's not that good. But there was a stretch where he was absolutely a useful rotation player who had a couple of seasons of shooting high 30s from 3, can set guys up, and you've seen his game sort of transition to that now that he's back in Cleveland, where he can be a high assist player and get things set up and be a good defender. Not sure how much more we want there. 23 is Nicolo Melli. Like Daniel Tice, we haven't seen him in the NBA much, actually just this season. But his ability to be a solid enough defensive big man, but also being a real threat from deep, is what we sort of want in the NBA. And again, the guys under him, I'm not sure they're that good. 24 is Andre Robertson. Yes, I know the last 2 years have been ruined by his knee injury. He's one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA, but an absolute, you could not be more of a liability on offense if you tried. And that's a concern. That's why I think it's a real specialist pick. Do I have absolute elite offensive talent around him that can hide it? And even then in the playoffs, is it going to make any difference because he's just going to be ignored? And is the defense enough to cover up for that? And in a lot of cases, I'm not sure it is. Number 25 is the blue swimmer, Alan Crabb, somehow a worse version of Tony Snell. Theoretically, he is a guy that sometimes gets labeled as a point guard, obviously erroneously, is a shooter who doesn't shoot all that well. He allegedly is a defender who's not that good of a defender. I think he's been one of the most overrated players in the NBA over the last 5-6 years, but a rotation level guy. 26 is Scooter Magruder, Rodney Magruder, who we're not really seeing much of for the Clippers this year, but when he was in that rotation role in Miami, absolutely fine as a wing who plays defense and hits threes. Same as James Ennis, who's had moments of looking really good, stretches with Memphis and New Orleans, disappeared in Houston, good times in Philadelphia, sort of all up and down now in Orlando, playing another nice role there. And it's so hard to get consistent. Even with Miami, he had some moments, but consistency's always been a problem for Jimmy. Let's start rolling through the rest of these. To round out the first round, at 28 is Raul Neto, absolutely competent NBA backup point guard. Number 29 is maybe a little bit controversial. This bloke was the number 1 overall pick in this draft. It's Anthony Bennett. Now, was he dreadful? Yes. Was there potentially reasons for that? Yes. Illnesses, asthma, a nonsense organisation, him getting the expectation, and I'm definitely never going to rule this out, the expectations put onto him by being the number one pick when he wasn't expected to be, I think it had an impact on him. But he went to the G League and he played pretty well. He turned himself into an absolute 3-point bomber. He had 2 G League seasons where he hit over 3 threes per game. And in fact, his career G League 3-point shooting is 42% on over 5 attempts per game. Why can't he get another crack in the NBA? That is value. That's Ryan Anderson value. It obviously didn't work for him in the NBA. He's never going to get back into the NBA. But how much of that is teams just, we're not willing to go, well, it's Anthony Bennett, mate. He's shit. I reckon I could find use for a bloke who hits 2 threes a game at 45% as a big man. I could find use for it somehow. I'm sure I could. But is it just that that's the G League and it just doesn't translate to the NBA? I'm not sure. But I've got to chuck him in the first round. Number 30 is Shane Larkin. Strong moments for Boston and for Brooklyn in the NBA. Played very well in Europe. An underrated NBA rotation player, I think. At 31, we have got Troy Daniels. 32, Ian Clark. 33, the Moose, Mike Muscala. 34, pick 9 in this draft, Trey Burke. Woof. He had about half a season of looking decent and then not that much after that. 35, Solomon Hill. 36, Reggie Bullock. At number 37, another top 10 pick who was shitful, Ben McLemore, who sort of resurrected his career a little bit for Houston this season, but also, I think, somewhat overrated. The 37 is McLemore. 38, undrafted Ryan Broekhoff, who, again, probably some Australian bias coming in there with Broekhoff. I think he's a 40+% European three-point shooter who showed that ability in the NBA. Why the hell aren't we giving that more of a chance? He's a very good shooter. 39, Bebe Nogueira, one of my favourite ever random-ass players. I actually have a Bebe Nogueira jersey. That's how much I like this bloke, who I think was sidetracked by some off-court stuff, but a massive advanced stats guy. The advanced stats for Bebe are absolutely through the roof. He is third in this group in box score plus minus, and it's not even close between him and the second guy. Unfortunately, he played just 141 games over his 4 years. But just a guy I wish things would have worked out differently for. At number 40, Shabazz Muhammad. Came into college, the next big thing, and then was out of the NBA in 3 years because I think he's just a numbnuts who just wouldn't listen to advice from coaches, and there's a lot wrong with him. 41, Alex Abrines. I thought highly of him. It didn't work out. 42, Isaiah Kanan. 43, my mate Jack Cooley. One of the best rebounding players you'll ever see. Struggles in some other areas, of course, but an absolute dominating force in the G League and now over in Europe. 44 is Archie Goodwin, and 45 is Steel and Mesh Nate Walters. Let's round this thing out. At number 46, Pierre Jackson. 47, Sergei Karasev. Amazingly was a first-round pick. 48, Lorenzo Brown. 49, Joffrey Lavigny. Number 50, Ryan Kelly. Remember that bloke? He used to start for the Lakers. Jesus. Number 51, Ricky Lido. Number 52, Grant Jarrett. Number 53, Tony Mitchell. Number 54, Carrick Felix. Great name. And then the last few picks. Number 55, Jeff Withey, who had some moments in the NBA. 56, Ray McCallum, who I'll always remember for playing 48 minutes a game for the Kings at the end of their season. 57, Jamal Franklin. 58, Livio Jean-Charles, who I would have hoped could do something in the NBA. Came over after 2 years and was cut before the season even began, despite having a guaranteed 4-year first-round deal. 59, Bojan Dublejevic. And number 60, Giannis Timmer. That is it. My 2013 NBA draft redraft. What did you like? What didn't you like? What did you think I got wrong? Let me know down in the comments below, and don't forget to check out today's episode of Rejecting the Screen on the Locked On Podcast Network, guys. We are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.